liquidity and prompt corrective action framework was one bone of contention between Urjit Patel and the Modi government. The other one was, what should the RBI be doing with its surplus reserves, surplus capital? Should that be transferred to the public at large? Should the government be getting a higher dividend? Should the RBI really be sitting on the kind of surplus it is? So it was decided when Urjit Patel was the governor that there would be a committee, an expert committee that would be set up to look into a policy for transferring surplus capital lying with the RBI. Urjit Patel resigned, Shaktikanta Das is the new governor, and late evening yesterday a circular was floated which talked about a 6-member committee looking into this very issue. Is going to be led by Dr. Bimal Jalan. Let's go to Supriya Sheenet for more on this. Supriya, 6-member committee that was announced yesterday. What do you make of what the circular has had to say?
Ending months of speculation, if I may, and some of the most irresponsible debate on quote-unquote raiding the RBI reserves. The RBI appointed a 6-member panel to look into the economic capital framework. The panel will be headed by Bimal Jalan, will be vice-chaired by Rakesh Mohan, and it is his inclusion that really surprises and also impresses naysayers, because Rakesh Mohan has been a very, very strong opponent of reserve transfer. He's written 3 absolutely brilliant columns on this, which have oft been quoted. So the government and the RBI are really taking a leap of faith and trying to bring credibility back to the institution and to the discourse by getting Rakesh Mohan. So I think that that particular inclusion is very important. You can't miss sight of that. Of course, other than that, you've got Bharat Doshi and Sudhir Mankad, the directors on the board of RBI, to be a part of this panel, and so will Deputy Governor N. Vishwanathan. Of course, the most vocal proponent of this move is Subhash Chandra Garg, India's DA Secretary, and he will also be a part of these discussions. The committee will have to submit the report in 90 days from its first meeting, which virtually rules out any reserve transfer being impacted for this financial year. Remember, there was a lot of speculation whether some reserve could come in this financial year and will it be used for poll sops and all of that. So I think that gets virtually ruled out. I don't think the government, after being in conversation with the RBI over the setting up of this committee, would now want to erode credibility by taking more reserves. I don't think that's going to happen. So that issue gets addressed. What also is important to note here is that it is a big sign of it's a huge sign of conversation happening between the RBI on one hand, the central banker on one hand, and the government on the other. You know, Shaktikanta Das is somebody who has aligned with New Delhi. He's proven it yet again. He's taken the government into confidence. He's got them on board, because appointment of Rakesh Mohan couldn't have happened without the government being on board, because he's been such a vocal opponent of the reserve transfer. The terms of reference are pretty extensive. They don't just review status, need and justification of various provisions. They also talk about reviewing the global best practices for central banks across the world. It is also likely to suggest an adequate level of risk provisioning that the RBI needs to do. It will determine whether the RBI is holding provisions, reserves and buffers in surplus and also in deficit. So there is cognizance of the fact that when currency is volatile, when gold and things go through the roof, what sort of reserves should be held by the RBI. And of course, like I said, the committee will have to submit its report in 90 days from the first meeting. So a good move. Finally, the framework is there. It's a pleasant surprise to see people like Rakesh Mohan and Bimal Jalan there. 2 extremely responsible voices. This is a well-balanced committee with people who understand the market perspective and of course people who understand macroeconomy. So on that note, back to you in the studios to take it forward.
We also caught up with a whole host of experts on the formation of this high-profile panel. Let's listen.
Whatever policy that this committee should be recommending, that should stand good for across all type of situations, like where the foreign exchange surplus, foreign exchange deficit, or by FT going up, going down. So during in an economy with the business cycles all around, any kind of situation can be forthcoming and down the line. So the policy should be able to take care of every type of situation. So that's why that particular, I would read that particular reference from that perspective, not the current requirement or the current demand from the government that is supposed to be transferred. That is a short-term view. You have to have a complete understanding of every possible situation, and in each possible situation, what kind of balance sheet strength the Reserve Bank should have. Demand for interim dividend is totally a different one, but that is a current for the present, for the current year. So that I would expect that would be dealt with by the Reserve Bank separately. And not this committee may not necessarily be giving a recommendation on that one small issue. If at all, as a principle, what kind of transfers, profit transfers, the government, Reserve Bank should be doing to government over the period, whether it should be at one go, whether it can be in installments, those kind of discussion, definitely this committee, I would expect them to apply that point.
I would say that the members who have been put on the committee have a very high degree of credibility. They have one of the finest economic brains in the country. So I'm confident that they will come up with something that would, going forward, bring some sanity into the discussion about whether the reserve should be large or small, etc. There is a lot of confusion in the minds of the people who are talking about these reserves, because much of it is notional in nature, in the sense that they have gold reserves. As the prices go up and down, there is a valuation of that, and therefore it appears to be a very large sum. If the gold prices suddenly shoot up, the value of that becomes very large, and if it starts dropping, then it will shrink. So similarly, it is with the foreign exchange reserves also. I think there is a kind of a confusion in the minds of the people who are talking about these reserves. But I think it's a very good step because once this entire issue has gone into threadbare, then we would have a much clearer picture of how the reserves are formed, how they are valued, what is actually the liquidity in these reserves, whether they are liquid or illiquid. All these issues will be discussed threadbare by the committee, I presume.